How would you like to get double or even triple food production from a single garden bed? It's easier than you think. Hi, I'm GardenerScott, and I discuss everything gardening so that you can become a better gardener. Today, let me give you some tips about succession planting. Succession planting is a gardening method that experienced gardeners use, and successful gardeners definitely are doing it. But there's no reason why, even as a brand new gardener, you can't take advantage of the concept. And the concept is really quite simple. If you have a garden bed, always be growing something in that garden bed. It's that simple. This is often what happens in the garden, and almost all of us gardeners are guilty of this. You know you want to grow tomatoes, so you decide where you're going to grow them, like this bed where I've got tomatoes. So in the spring, you get the bed ready to go. Hopefully you're amending the soil, you're getting everything ready. You've chosen your tomatoes. Maybe you're growing them from seed indoors, or you go to a nursery and you buy the plants ready to put in the ground. And then after the last frost, when everything's warmed up, you put the tomatoes in the bed. And then you take care of them, they grow, you harvest, a cold comes, the tomatoes die, you pull them out, and this bed is done for the year. Hopefully you had a great tomato harvest. But that's where the problem comes in and where you're losing potential food production. In my Colorado Zone 5B garden, I've got about 4 months of good growing for tomatoes and other warm season plants. So I've got my tomato bed, I put my tomatoes in and then eventually take them out for 4 months out of the year. Well, what about the other 8 months? That's lost opportunity. I've spent money on that bed. I've spent a lot of time and effort getting that bed ready to go, and I'm just going to leave it sitting for 8 months out of the year? This is where succession planting comes into play. It's growing a plant and then in succession growing another plant, and potentially in the same season in succession growing a completely different plant. It's taking cool season plants and warm season plants and putting them into a bed at the best time for that plant. Here's an example. These are turnips. Turnips do not like the heat of summer. They bolt. And so these turnips are sending up flower stalks and beginning to set seed. In the space right next door, I was also growing turnips, but I harvested them and it left me with bare ground. Well, rather than keeping bare ground until next year where I might want to do some more turnips, I went ahead and sowed some cucumber seeds. This is succession planting in action. In this bed, a couple months ago, I started seeds of cool season plants. I've got beets, I've got spinach, I had a pretty big section of the turnips, and I have Swiss chard. Those plants like the cool weather, so I got a good early start on my season, and I've already had a harvest. But cucumbers don't like those cool conditions, just like the turnips don't like the hot conditions. So after I harvested the turnips, I put cucumbers in because now is the ideal time with the hot sun and the warm weather. The cucumbers will grow, and after I collect some of these seeds, I'll pull these turnips out and I'll put in some more cucumbers and allow them to grow. But they've only got a couple more months before my weather starts changing, and cucumbers can't handle the cold conditions. Hopefully by then I'll have harvested a lot of cucumbers. The cold comes, I pull the cucumber plants out, and then we're back to the cool conditions again. In this bed, I'll put in more cool season plants, the kind of plants that can handle a little bit of frost, maybe a little bit of snow. And I'll have 3 seasons of growing plants in this one bed. That's succession planting. Succession planting is often confused with another method of growing your plants. And that method is staggered plantings, or interval plantings, or relay plantings. That idea is that you'll sow some seeds, wait about 2 weeks and then sow that same seed again. And then you can wait 2 more weeks and sow that same seed again. That method is focused on the harvest because those first seeds will come into harvest. 2 weeks later, you'll get another harvest. 2 weeks later, you'll get another harvest. The idea being that you're not inundated with your harvest all at once. You're spreading it out over a longer period of time. But typically, even when it's called succession planting, it's only focused on growing one type of plant from beginning to end. And it misses out on the great opportunity to have other plants before and after you're growing that particular type of garden plant. Staggered or interval plantings works great in areas with a long, moderate growing season. And there's a lot of video creators out there that have those type of gardens where you have months and months where you can just keep staggering your plantings and get continual harvests. But there are so many of us who are gardening with 3 very distinct growing seasons: the spring, the summer, and the fall. So I can't get a lot of interval plantings done within my growing season. Instead, I have to focus on what succession planting really is, and that's choosing the plant and the location based on my climate and weather. So in this square foot garden bed, rather than growing the same plant in an interval, I had my cool season plants. I had a lot of radishes here. As soon as I pulled the radishes, I put in some squash and then some cucumbers. On the other side of the bed over here, where I've already harvested some peas, I did the same thing. I took out those cool season plants and I put in warm season plants. These warm season plants will carry me through the rest of the summer. You can combine those 2 basic ideas of succession planting, like I pointed out in this bed right here. I pulled out the turnips and I put in some basic straight 8 cucumbers. And my season will be long enough to support those cucumbers until harvest. And then when I pull out these turnips, I'm also going to put in cucumbers, but this time I'm going to put in a pickling cucumber that doesn't take as long to grow to harvest. 2 distinct cucumbers, 2 distinct harvests in place of the turnips. But I couldn't do the same thing with peppers or tomatoes in this bed because there won't be enough time left in my growing season. That's why I had to put the peppers and the tomatoes in first and let them grow because they take a lot longer. But I can keep rotating. I can keep the interval plantings within these beds for as long as I get the harvests. There is planning required to get the most out of succession planting. Like in this bed, garlic. I put it in the ground about 9 months ago, and I know that I'm going to be harvesting it in about 3 weeks. Well, I had a bare spot at the end of this bed, so I went ahead and planted some peas. The peas are just getting ready to harvest, and I have about another 2 to 3 weeks before the plants will be spent. That'll coincide perfectly with when I harvest this garlic. So I'll be pulling the pea plants out, I'll be harvesting the garlic, and now this entire bed is ready for replanting. It's ready for another succession of plants. This time I'll be looking into the fall. So to replace these plants, I'll be putting in things like beets and more turnips and Swiss chard and spinach. The kind of plants that when I get my first frost in late September or early October, they'll be going strong and they'll just shake off that frost. And I should be able to have a harvest well into October, even November if I'm lucky, in this bed. In one of those other beds, like the tomatoes and the cucumbers, when they're starting to falter, that's when I'll plant the garlic for next year. You can use the knowledge of harvest to your benefit. These butter crunch lettuce plants are going to be harvested this week. I knew that was coming, so a few weeks ago I went ahead and put in the seeds of some yellow squash. So the yellow squash is already starting to grow. The lettuce isn't interfering with it, and it's not interfering with the lettuce. As soon as the lettuce is harvested, now these squash plants will have plenty of room to grow. try to get out of the mindset of all or nothing. Like in a bed with these carrots. They take a long time to germinate, and then they take a long time to grow. And then you harvest them, and it's later in the summer, and you think, I don't have time to grow anything else. So this year, this bed was all carrots. Now next year, it'll be something else, and it'll be nothing in between. Start learning about your options. Start taking advantage of the climate. The carrots will be done, but there's still plenty of time to grow something like lettuce or radish that may only take a month from start to finish, or some of those hardier root vegetables that you can grow into the winter. I speak about 3 seasons, the spring, the summer, and the fall, but if you have a very long, moderate growing season, you might actually have 4 seasons, a spring, 2 summers, and a fall. And during those 2 summers, if your season is long enough, you can grow some of the fast-growing plants, some of the 60-day cucumbers or 60-day squashes, and plant them back to back. And if you've got a really long growing season with a little bit of extra protection over your beds, some plastic hoop houses, you might actually be able to get a 5th season. I can get about 3.5. So when I put some plastic over my hoops, I can gain a couple weeks on both sides. When you learn how to do it and you take advantage of succession planting, you will be growing plants in your bed for a lot longer than you're not growing plants in your beds. This year, as you're harvesting your plants, think about the future. And so when a frost threatens, when the peppers and the cucumbers and the squashes and especially tomatoes are done for the season, well, don't tell yourself that you're done too. Instead, say to yourself, what's next? There's space that has just been freed up. What seeds can I put in? What plants can I put in that will take me into the fall and into the winter and increase the food production in my garden? That's succession planting. Take advantage of it. And if you want to learn more about how to do all of this gardening stuff, well, consider watching another GardenerScott video. I'm Gardener Scott. Enjoy gardening.